Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, Chief of the Air Staff.
This is a moment for American leadership. A moment for America to show that it can honour its international treaty obligations. Not out of charity, but out of its own enduring role in global security and strategic stability. President Putin, no nation benefits from the continued loss of life we are witnessing. There is still a moment now to stop this war, to prevent further suffering for Ukrainians and Russians alike.
Union Jack flags, an international security forum, a nameplate with one word on it, Prince. The man behind that nameplate has no official diplomatic role. 3 days after he stood at that podium, his father boarded a plane to Washington for the most sensitive royal diplomatic visit in years. That speech got 2 days of wall-to-wall coverage. Every broadcast segment asked the same question. Did he have the right to be in that room? Nobody asked the question that actually matters. That forum ran substantive legal analysis on Ukrainian children being forcibly removed from their country, stripped of their language, given new identities, almost entirely ignored. And from a $2.7 million raise, $8,310 went to South America. Most coverage spent 2 days debating whether he had the right to be in that room. That argument is the one they keep having instead of the one that actually matters. Here is what actually matters. This is not a story about a prince who cannot stop making headlines at the wrong moment. That is the surface. That is the frame the panel shows run because it is the easiest one to fill 40 minutes with. What this story is actually about is a single decision, one that has been sitting in the palace since January 2020, that nobody has made. And the man who holds it has been choosing every week for 5 years to leave it exactly where it is. In January 2020, Harry stepped back from royal duties. The agreement was explicit. The titles would not be used for commercial or platform purposes. The couple would no longer represent the sovereign. In April 2025, he stood at an international security forum in a foreign country. Union Jack behind him. Prince on the nameplate, speaking on behalf of no official body, representing no government mandate. There is one decision that ends all of this. Charles still hasn't made it. And by the time this video is finished, you will understand exactly why that decision is the only thing that has ever mattered here. Subscribe before we go further, because what Charles does next is the decision that ends this chapter, and you don't want to miss it when it breaks. Harry is a man who told the world he wanted a private family life, and has spent every month since using the title that private life could never have earned him to stand on stages the private life would never have opened. It is the documented record of the last 5 years, the Invictus platforms, or the Netflix series. And now, a foreign security forum, April 2025, 17 minutes, legally precise, internationally broadcast. The title is The Mechanism. It always has been. Without the word prince on that nameplate, he is a private individual with strong opinions about Ukraine. With it, he is something the forum organizers wanted in the room.
I am not here as a politician. I am here as a soldier who understands service, as a humanitarian who has seen the human cost of conflict, and as a friend of Ukraine who believes the world must not grow used to this war or numb to its consequences. Because what is happening here is not simply a war about territory. It is a war about values, about sovereignty, about whether the principles that underpin our shared democracy shall hold meaning.
The Kiev speech ran 17 minutes. Read it back, the full transcript, not the coverage summary. The section on Ukrainian children was legally grounded in a way that surprised people who actually read it. Harry cited the Rome Statute. He named the Budapest Memorandum violation explicitly, the 1994 agreement under which Ukraine surrendered its nuclear arsenal in exchange for sovereignty guarantees from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. He argued, on record, at an international security forum that US intervention levels in the region were insufficient. That is not the speech of a man reading from a humanitarian brief. That is high-level political advocacy, the kind that traditionally sits with heads of state and working foreign ministers, not with private individuals who stepped back from royal duties in 2020. Every commentator spent 2 days debating his right to occupy the room. The legal architecture of what he actually said went almost entirely unexamined. The substance was real, and the messenger made it impossible for the message to land, and that impossibility is not incidental. It is the direct consequence of a title arrangement nobody has resolved.
The theme of this forum, as we've heard, asks darkness or dawn? Is light ahead? And standing here in a country that has endured so much, it would be easy to feel the weight of darkness. But Ukraine has already begun to answer that question, not in speeches, but in action. For more than a decade, since 2014, Ukraine has stood on the front line of a struggle that extends far beyond its borders. And since the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian people have done something extraordinary. You have adapted, you have endured, and you have held the line.
3 days. That is the gap between the Kiev podium and King Charles's departure for Washington, not 3 weeks or 3 months. 3 days before the most sensitive royal diplomatic visit in years, Harry stood at a foreign security forum and publicly criticized the foreign policy of the host nation Charles was flying to meet. Trump's response was immediate. Prince Harry, he said, is not speaking for the UK, that's for sure. The dismissal was clean. The diplomatic residue was not. It's a story about the one institution in the world that can end all of this with a single decision, and keeps choosing not to. The system at stake is not Harry's reputation. It is the palace's title-granting authority, and the people who have actually read the stepping back agreement understand that the title's question was always the mechanism. Everything else is noise. Most channels are covering the speech. What they're not covering is the piece of paper that sits in the palace right now that could end all of it. Did Harry time that speech deliberately to damage his father's Washington visit, or is that giving him too much credit for strategy? Drop it in the comments. Here is what the institutional picture actually looks like right now. 3 pressure points, all live simultaneously, all running through the same thread.
Few believed that would be possible. And yet, here you are, still standing, still fighting, and still leading. Because this is what leadership looks like in the modern world. Not just strength in arms, but strength in unity. Not just resilience, but innovation under fire. And not just survival, but purpose. Ukraine is now at the forefront of modern warfare, developing some of the most advanced drone capabilities anywhere in the world, adapting faster than larger forces, and proving that agility and determination can counter brute force.
Go back to the room itself. The forum is the Kiev Security Forum, April 2025. The speech is 17 minutes, and the section that deserved serious examination received almost none. Because the moment anyone in that coverage cycle named the speaker, the substance became secondary. The debate about the messenger consumed everything the message was trying to say. The indignation here is not at Harry. The indignation is at the arrangement that guaranteed this outcome, an arrangement where a title with no active institutional role attached to it is deployed at international forums. And the institution responsible for that title watches it happen without moving. And what Charles has had in his hands since January 2020, the one document that ends this, is exactly what we need to talk about. 3 days later, Charles's plane lifts off for Washington. The visit was already complicated before Harry stood at that podium. King Charles arriving in the United States during a period of significant transatlantic friction. A trip designed to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence and reset a special relationship that had been under strain. Diplomatic sources had already described the visit as risky. The wartime context, the domestic political sensitivities in Washington, the careful choreography required to make it land. Then Harry spoke.
We must be absolutely clear about the nature of this war. This is not an accident, nor a misunderstanding, and nor the inevitable fog of conflict. It is the product of sustained, deliberate policy, planned, executed, and defended at the highest levels.
Trump's dismissal, Prince Harry is not speaking for the UK, that's for sure, was clean and immediate. But a dismissal is not a resolution. Charles arrived in Washington carrying his son's speech in his diplomatic baggage, whether he acknowledged it or not. The host nation had just received public criticism of its foreign policy from a man whose nameplate said Prince and whose flags said United Kingdom. The damage is no longer Harry's problem at this point. It has transferred. Charles walks into those Washington rooms with something he did not bring and cannot put down, and the title arrangement he has chosen not to resolve is exactly what put it there. The content of the speech was Harry's. The diplomatic consequence of the title is Charles's. That distinction is the whole story. When Charles's plane lands in Washington, every one of these pressure points lands with him. The title's question is still unanswered. We'll get to why. There is one name Harry keeps returning to when he needs the world to take him seriously. One invocation that bypasses the debate about his right to speak and lands somewhere harder to argue with: his mother. At moments of maximum diplomatic inconvenience, the memory of Princess Diana is the frame he reaches for. The humanitarian work as continuation. The titles as the mechanism that keeps the legacy in motion. That framing has a cost. The Archwell Foundation, the vehicle through which that humanitarian legacy is meant to operate, filed its 2024 public returns. The numbers are specific. $2.7 million raised, $5.2 million spent, a $2.5 million deficit. The previous year showed a $2.4 million surplus, a $5 million swing in a single financial year. 60% of staff gone. More than $1 million directed to the foundation's own PR firm from a $2.7 million raise. Harry said publicly he wanted a private family life and stepped back from royal duties. In April 2025, he spoke at a foreign security forum on behalf of no official body, using a title tied to those duties. Archwell raised $2.7 million. More than $1 million of that went to its own PR firm. The money that went to South America after the publicized Colombia tour, $8,310. The financial picture matters because it is the second of 3 pressure points that are all live simultaneously, and the titles are the thread that runs through all of them. A single-year deficit in a young organization going through restructuring is not misconduct. State that clearly. A foundation that spent 5 years building infrastructure, lost significant staff, and drew on reserves to fund its program, work is not automatically a charity in crisis. That argument exists. It is not unreasonable on its face. What the documented picture actually shows is something more specific. Charity Watch is an independent, non-profit watchdog, operating since 1992. No editorial position on Harry or Meghan. No institutional hostility toward the Sussex brand. They contact charities routinely as part of their standard watchdog function, rating organizations on financial transparency and efficiency for institutional donors and grant-making bodies, who use those ratings as due diligence. They contacted Archwell 3 times, January 22, 2024. A written request for independently audited financial statements, the kind the foundation publicly claims to produce in its federal tax filings. Ignored. December 6, 2024, a second written request. Ignored. January 6, 2026, a third request sent by US mail. ignored. 2 years, 3 requests, total silence. The DHS confirmed Harry's immigration application followed all applicable rules. The records remain partially redacted. The Heritage Foundation challenge continues. This is not an administrative oversight. An oversight gets corrected when the second letter arrives. A pattern is what remains after the third one does. Charity Watch issued Archwell a questionable rating, reflecting a non-disclosure of critical financial information that prevents any meaningful evaluation of accountability. The absence of editorial hostility is what makes that finding land harder, not softer. They were not looking for a reason to flag Archwell. The procedure delivered the verdict regardless. Should Archwell donors be demanding their money back? Or is a charity deficit just normal growing pains? Because those are the two camps, and the answer you land on depends entirely on whether you think 3 ignored transparency requests from an independent watchdog over 2 years is an administrative failure or a decision. Drop it in the comments. I've been watching this institution for years. Here's my read. The 3 pressure points in this story are not separate. They are not 3 bad weeks happening simultaneously by coincidence. The diplomatic damage in Kiev, the charity transparency collapse, the visa exposure sitting in partially redacted court filings in Washington. Every one of them runs through the same thread, the title, the word on the nameplate. The thing Charles has had the authority to revoke since the day Harry stepped back and has chosen, every single week, not to touch. As Charles's plane lifts off for Washington, all 3 are live at once. The Kiev speech is 48 hours old. The Charity Watch rating is on record. The Heritage Foundation challenge is active. The Spare Act is sitting in Congress with Harry's memoir named in the operative clause. Trump has dismissed the deportation question for now. But for now and resolved are not the same thing. And everyone in that Washington briefing room knows it. The reckoning is not coming. The reckoning is already here. It is sitting in the space between every decision Charles has not made and every platform Harry has walked onto because those decisions remain unmade. Charles is not a passive figure in this story. Passivity is a choice. Every week the titles stay in Harry's hands is another week Charles has actively chosen to leave them there. The restraint that looks like grace from the inside looks like something else entirely from the Washington briefing room his son just complicated. Before I tell you what happened next, has Charles been protecting Harry by not stripping the titles, or has he been protecting himself? Comment now, because the answer changes everything about what comes next. Kiev Security Forum, April 2025. Documented public statement. That is not a celebrity humanitarian making vague gestures toward a conflict zone. That is a legally precise argument, grounded in the Rome Statute, delivered at an international security forum on a cause that deserved the serious examination it did not receive. The content was real. The cause was legitimate. Harry has sustained a genuine commitment to Ukraine advocacy, documented, consistent, not incidental. The people who donated to that cause in good faith deserve that acknowledgement. The substance of what he said in that room deserved coverage it never got. And then the condemned moment, because it cannot be separated from the sympathy, and it should not be. He delivered that speech 3 days before his father's most sensitive diplomatic visit in years. He had told the world he wanted a private family life. He used royal titles he agreed not to use for platform purposes. His charity ignored financial transparency requests from an independent watchdog for 2 years. He invoked his mother's memory at a moment of maximum diplomatic inconvenience. The timing is not incidental. The content being legitimate does not make the timing accidental. Both things are true, and the space between them is where this story lives. This is important to state clearly. The instinct to protect rather than punish is a recognizably human response. Hold that before the condemnation arrives. Charles has absorbed every one of these episodes without reaching for the one weapon that ends them. The Kiev speech, the charity collapse, the visa exposure, each one landing, each one processed. none of them provoking the single institutional response that would close the loop. A father watching a son self-destruct, choosing grace over force at every turn. That logic is not cynical. It is not performative. It is the recognizable logic of a parent who cannot stop hoping the child will course-correct on his own. That sympathy is genuine. The narrator holds it without retreat. And then, the condemned moment, because the documented picture does not allow the sympathy to sit there unchallenged. The titles are still Harry's. 5 years after the stepping back agreement, 5 years of podiums, platforms, fundraising pitches, and visa applications, all running through the word Prince on a nameplate that Charles has had the authority to remove since January 2020. The restraint that looks like grace from the inside looks like institutional failure from the outside. Every week Charles does not act is not a week he fails to act. It is a week he actively chooses to leave the tools in Harry's hands. The longer that choice continues, the harder it becomes to call it restraint. At some point, and the documented record suggests that point has already passed, it becomes something else entirely. The Archwell Foundation was founded with publicly stated humanitarian ambitions. The people who donated did so in good faith. That matters before the accountability argument lands. A single-year deficit in a young foundation going through restructuring is not misconduct. State that clearly. What the documented picture actually shows is something more specific than a bad financial year. Charity Watch has operated as an independent non-profit watchdog since 1992. Their ratings are used by institutional donors and grant-making bodies as due diligence references. No editorial position on Harry or Meghan. No institutional hostility toward the Sussex brand. 3 written requests. January 2024. December 2024, January 2026. For independently audited financial statements the Foundation publicly claims to produce. All 3 ignored. 2 years. Total silence. The absence of editorial hostility is what makes the finding land harder. Charity Watch was not looking for a reason to flag Archwell. The rating, reflecting non-disclosure of critical financial information that prevents any meaningful evaluation of accountability, was delivered by procedure, not by prejudice. That distinction is the verdict. 3 institutions, 3 verdicts, none of them editorial. Charity Watch contacted Archwell 3 times over 2 years and received no response. The rating was delivered by procedure, not prejudice. Congressman Greg Stuber introduced the SPARE Act, legislation that names Harry's memoir directly and mandates deportation for foreign nationals who misrepresent controlled substance use on visa applications. DHS lawyer Jared Panter stated Harry's application followed all applicable rules and regulations. The Heritage Foundation's legal challenge continues regardless. The records released in March 2025 were so extensively redacted, they shed no new light on Harry's specific disclosures. The DHS ruling appeared to resolve this. Appeared to and did are not the same thing. Now, what has been denied on record? The AI authorship claim, the deliberate sabotage of Charles's Washington visit, the visa violation allegation. What has never been addressed? Whether deploying the HRH title at Kiev is consistent with the 2020 agreement. Why Charles has not revoked the titles. Whether the 2020 agreement was designed to prevent exactly this. Why Archwell has never responded to 3 transparency requests over 2 years. The viewer can draw their own conclusion from that silence. Here is the position this narrator holds. Stated once. Charles is not a passive figure in a story that is happening to him. Every week the titles remain, in Harry's hands is a week Charles has chosen to leave them there. The diplomatic damage in Washington, the charity transparency collapse, the visa exposure sitting in partially redacted court filings. None of it is possible without the word Prince on a nameplate that Charles has had the authority to remove since January 2020. The restraint looks like grace. From the outside, from the Washington briefing room, from the Charity Watch filing, from the Heritage Foundation's legal submissions, it looks like something else. It looks like a man who has decided that the cost of not acting is something the institution can absorb indefinitely. The documented record suggests the institution cannot pull back from all of it. From the outside, it looked like Harry's catastrophic week. Another chapter in a familiar story. The prince who left, who keeps creating damage, who cannot stop pulling the institution into his orbit, even as he insists he has left it behind. That is the frame every panel discussion ran. That is the frame most people watching this will have arrived with. It is the wrong frame. This week was not about Harry. Harry has been consistent. He has been doing exactly this, the podiums, the titles, the platforms, since January 2020. Nothing he did this week was new. The Kiev speech was a more consequential version of what he has been doing for 5 years. Documented, predictable, entirely in character. The story this week, the story this whole arc has been about, is the man who watched it happen and still has not moved. Charles holds one decision. He has held it since the day Harry stepped back. The titles are still Harry's. Every room Harry walked into this week, he walked into because of what Charles has chosen. Every single week for 5 years not to do. That is the story. That is what changed nothing. And that is exactly why everything keeps happening. There is a principle that sits underneath all of this. It does not require any knowledge of royal protocol to understand. It does not require 5 years of following this story. The person who gives someone the tools to cause damage is as responsible for the damage as the person wielding them. That truth lands on Charles, not because he is a villain. The complex protagonist framing in this channel exists for a reason. Charles is not a simple figure, and this narrator has never treated him as one. The instinct to protect rather than punish is recognizably human. A father watching a son self-destruct, choosing grace over force at every turn. There is logic in that. There is even something admirable in it, if you look at it from one angle. But grace has a cost when the tools you are extending grace about are institutional ones. Harry did not walk into that Kiev forum as a private citizen. He walked in as a prince. The word was on the nameplate. The flags were behind him. The title is what opened the door, and the title belongs to an institution Charles is responsible for protecting. Every week the titles remain in Harry's hands is another week they are available for exactly this. Another security forum, another fundraising pitch, another visa application. Charles knows this. The palace knows this. The one thing nobody has explained, publicly, on record, ever, is why the lever stays unpulled. That silence is now part of the story. Here is what happens if Charles keeps waiting. The problem does not dissolve. It does not become less complicated with time. Every week that passes without a decision is another week the decision becomes harder to make. And another week, it drifts closer to the one person in this institution who did not create it and will have no choice but to inherit it. William has watched this play out for 5 years. He has said nothing publicly about the titles. He has not needed to. It is not his decision to make yet. But anyone paying attention to how William operates, to the institutional architecture he has been quietly building, to every move he has made since 2020, understands that William does not leave structural problems unresolved. That is not how he works. That is not what he is building toward. The longer Charles delays, the more the title's question stops being a father's decision about a son and starts being a king's inheritance problem for the next reign. William will not have the luxury of paternal grace. He will not have the cover of it either. What looks like restraint on Charles now will look like a problem handed forward. And William will be the one who has to resolve it with none of the emotional logic that has kept Charles from acting. The title question, what the 2020 agreement actually permits, and what Charles has the constitutional authority to revoke, is the subject of the next video. The answer is more specific than anyone has reported. Should Charles strip Harry of his titles now, or has he already waited so long that it no longer matters?